And joining us live is Mzwanele Mjwanti, Vice-chancellor. We have Professor Stanley Mukula and Vice-chancellor at TUT, Dr. Ramodungwane Tabane, education expert, and Professor Ahmed Bawa is on Skype. In studio with me is also Dr. Diane Parker, Deputy Director General for University Branch in the Higher Education Department, and Mielane Mkabela is an economist. To all of you, thanks so much for joining us. The lines are open at home on 011-542-2186 as we just reflect on the events of the day and what kind of a society we're going to build if there isn't access to education. We'll start with you, Professor Mukula, and just reflecting on where we are now with the Fees Must Fall campaign.
Thank you very much, Cindy. Maybe just a correction first. Now, I'm not the Vice-chancellor, but the Deputy Vice-chancellor for Academic Affairs.
Yeah.
So, indeed, today we welcome the statement from the Minister about the issues of fees, and we really appreciate the decision taken to look into the missing middle that we have been actually arguing for. So first to say, as TUT in particular, we know where students are coming from. They are coming from very poor background, from families that are headed by kids who are not actually having parents in between. But you can imagine, without any funding of some sort, these kids will not be able to access higher education. So for us now, the government is coming to the part to say, for that type of people, we are going to assist them. And we want to welcome the statement that was made today by the Minister.
But Dr. Parker, there's a case to be made for those that simply cannot pay, let alone not to incur a further fee increase. And these are possibly students that have the aptitude, they've done very well academically, except they're excluded because of finances. Do you think those are catered for enough or adequately?
I think so. I think in terms of the funding that the government has made available for poor students, ones who really can't pay, that has increased tremendously since 2010. So we're looking at an amount of 14.5 billion right now in the NSFAS fund per annum to support poor students. We're talking about supporting 205,000 poor students within universities alone and another 200,000 in TVET colleges. So access to poor students has been made available. The real difficulty is access for students from working class families and from middle class families. And that is what has been dealt with here. Funding to be made available to ensure that those students do not experience any fee increase from their 2015 fee. That means children of teachers, of nurses, of policemen, of social workers, and so on, will all be catered for by this deal. And we believe that this was the best possible solution given the different possibilities that existed in the system.
Let's get a voice from Vice-chancellor Mzwanele. Your response to Dr. Parker, Higher Education, saying that this is the best decision that they could have made. It is a very delicate balancing act after all.
Thank you very much. I think we're just having a wrong conversation. That's basically why today we had to shut down the universities, because we just think that DHET is having a wrong conversation with the wrong people. Ours is very clear. We want free and quality education. And the outcome of today's announcement by the minister to say, firstly, this is what the minister said, that I don't know what I'm doing. The councils of the universities, in fact, should decide how much of that fee increment they're going to do. Yes, I can try and cover for the missing middle and the poor up to a cap of 600,000, which means per annum. So basically, if I'm sitting at 601, well, goodbye. And this is the challenge that the SRCs have at the beginning of the year, every year. So this is what I foresee, for instance. I'm going to be sitting in the office, a student is going to walk in. Hi, Mzwanele. My mom is, per annum, is getting about 614,000, and my fees were increased, but she can't afford. So there's a greater structural problem here, that, which is why we're saying that perhaps the government, DHET, and whatever you can call it, is having a wrong conversation. What we're looking at here is a structural change, a free fee and decolonized decolonized higher education sector that is accessible to all. That's what we're looking at here. So this is why then we think that they're having a wrong conversation.
Just the education expert, Dr. Tabane, if you can just give us your perspective with this matter, whether the country can really afford, let alone monetarily, the fees or free higher education at all.
You see, the problem is, or the interesting part of South Africa is that we have these two poles that we need to cater for, the very, very, very poor and those who have. And unfortunately, with campaigns like these, the fight is all for both poles. The haves still have their monies and their opportunities, and the have-nots. I hear what Mzwandile is saying. Mzwandile is going one notch up and says, what about the one with 601? So where are you going to draw the line? To draw a line? And this is where somewhere we need to draw a line. Is it feasible? Look, education is expensive. Universities have to buy certain soft, if I can call them soft necessities. For instance, to budget for the journals, to pay for page fees, all of these other issues that also create funds for the universities, but money needs to come from somewhere.
Get an economist perspective, Miyelane, just on the whole debate of what happens, best case scenario, when we have educated citizens with specialized degrees and qualifications, and yet there's no employment.
I think that is another issue when we are discussing employment or unemployment situation. But in general, how I will say is consumers are already indebted. All consumers of the country are already indebted. So that means for the past 12 months, we started to see a lot of defaults for short-term investments and long-term investments. That means consumers can manage, including middle class, can manage what the burden that they have in that comes to the financial commitments that they have. So in an 8% increment, which will come on the ones that are looked as affording, what does this mean? It's in each and every 1,000, they will add 80 rand. Since doing a master's, I will just give you a situation of doing a master's degree at university now. For a year, it cost almost 170,000, and for the second year, 170,000. So it will go to like you are 310,000. So that amount, when you look at 80 rand of each and every 1,000 rand, it's a lot of money. And undergraduate degree as well is very much expensive. So from 2004, when we transformed universities of higher education, Department of Education and the government of the day didn't plan in advance for the first 5 years and the second 5 years what will be the criteria of financing institutions of higher learning. That's why we are sitting at this conundrum now.
And it is about preservation of the world-class institutions that we have, but in the same vein, also encouraging or closing the education gap by affording students the ability to study. The education budget alone is the biggest amongst all the departments, and yet we're sitting with the likes of Mzwandile, who says their families simply cannot afford, be it over-indebtedness or not earning adequate salaries. What is your response to that, Dr. Parker?
Look, I think that we have to understand the issue of the fee increase for 2017 separate from the bigger call and the long-term solutions that we're looking for to ensure affordable higher education for all. Government's current policy is very clear that we should be looking at finding the funds to support poor and working class children for free higher education, and that we should be finding the funds to assist other children to get affordable loans to ensure that they can actually cover the upfront cost of fees. So I think that's the one side of things. The 2017 fee increment is really about how do we ensure that our system currently, whatever we do right now in terms of the current policy that is in place doesn't destabilize the system. That enables the system to go forward, but also supports students as far as is possible under the current situation. And I think a master's degree costing 180,000, maybe that's something that we can talk about and debate. But our information on universities' fees certainly doesn't show that kind of amount. Yeah. But I also want to be clear that we are talking about undergraduate higher education here. We are not talking about postgraduate higher education. We are talking about undergraduate higher education. And I think that we need to focus on that. And then secondly, I think that in terms of whether or not this is affordable, there is a social justice issue that we have to talk about. We are in an unequal society. We live in an unequal society, and therefore we have to consider how do we support those students into higher education that cannot really afford it. And there we are talking about the poor, the working class, and the middle class. That is who we are talking about.
All right, let's get a perspective from Professor Ahmed Bawa, South Africa, University of South Africa CEO. Thank you so much for your time, Prof. And just talking about access, there's the proverbial Tandi that is often spoken about, that in 20 years' time we need to see the aspirations and dreams of the majority black children having changed, that their lives need to have changed. Do you think we're on course in realizing those aspirations?
Well, I don't know if we're on course yet, but I think that there's a way for us to get to that point. And I think that the key issue really is for us to begin to think about the post-school education and training system as an entity rather than as kind of a fragmented, as a set of fragmented structures, So, for example, if we are considering the possibility of our 26 universities suddenly being able to take in another 1 million students, say, that's just not possible. Then you have to ask the question, is it possible for us to establish new universities? Well, yes, but not to the extent that we will need. So the key question then is, how do we create a post-school education and training system which is properly articulated so that if students enter colleges, for example, 2-year colleges, that they have the guarantees if they perform well, that they will get into the university system. Of course, that goes back to what Mzwelele was saying earlier, which is that we really need then a properly constructed financing model of such a model, a financial model that will allow students to be absorbed into the college sector, but which is then properly articulated into the university system.
All right, Mzwanele, I beg your pardon, Professor Bawa. Mzwanele, just a response from you. One on the higher education saying there is already adequate subsidies, if not support, for poor children, and that this relief comes primarily for middle-class income earners, and it is a good thing. This is just the first leg of this race. It's not the final decision. How do you respond? And would you call off your protest or shut down?
But Dr. Baka, you know what the conversation we're having here. Firstly, the increase that you're talking about in the subsidy, you know that you, comrades, have already been saying that it's low in terms of real values. And what's going to happen basically is that you are saying that you're going to subsidize the poor, and I've already raised the concern that we have with the cap being 600. Secondly, there's an issue that they don't tell you about, their inability to determine the person who's poor. And they're taking now that case to the universities, which is why we're going to have these problems that we're having, because that's a role of SARS to determine who's rich and poor in this country, and takes those that are rich or well off and then give that money to the universities, not the universities to decide, which is why we call for all students to have access to the universities without these complications that they bring to the universities. So this is the problem of the government and SARS to deal with it. So there's no burden that's being taken off from the middle class and all of those things, because they know for sure that we've been sitting with the crisis of NSFAS for the past 20 years because they have been unable to determine who is poor. That's another problem we've had. And secondly, Dr. Baka, you also know that the Presidential Commission is not looking at the at how to on the modalities and how we're going to implement on free education. We've been being asked by that commission questions, and that commission is asking us.
Sorry, Mzwanele, I hate to interrupt you. We literally
possible.
have 2 minutes left. Just a very quick response from Dr. Tabane in how we can magically transcend this financial gap, especially for those who can access quality higher education and those who can't.
You know, I think communication, proper consultation is needed, and clearly someone feels aggrieved and someone is not listening. So proper communication between the powers that be and those that seriously need this education needs to sit down together and say, how do we go forward?
And Professor Mukhula, just the support generally for students. We see faces of young girls and boys fighting for what is a fundamental human right. It's enshrined in the Constitution that you should have access to education. And it is predominantly black children that are there. Where is a business, where is all the other support that could potentially assist here?
In fact, we're calling upon business to actually intervene in this case because as a university, for instance, we have encouraged all our staff members to make a contribution, what we call now a bursary scholarship fund, where we believe that it will be able to assist the NSFAS in order for us, our young people, to get educated. Without the intervention of big business, government cannot actually afford on its own. We know the pressing issue that the government is looking after. I mentioned earlier on the issue of health. We are all looking into this one resource, which is not able to carry the burden that we're supposed to. So from where we sit, we say we call upon the business to really intervene and assist our young people. But at the end of the day, these young people are going to graduate and go and work for those enterprises.
Yeah. So we're calling for innovative ways of having other income streams for universities. Dr. Parker, just final words from you.
I think it's really important that we separate out these issues and that we actually work towards ensuring we have a stable and sustainable higher education system while we deal with the issue of ensuring that all students have access to higher education, affordable higher education, and nobody is denied access due to their inability to pay. And I think that's what we're all trying to strive towards. But we've got to recognize that this doesn't happen in one big bang situation.
Just a quick one, Melanie.
Thanks for that. I believe that a lot of things are possible if we can do other things, mainly other departments. If we can have proper financial management in other departments, it can as well assist in times like this. But what is critical now is mainly for National Treasury to come up with a very good solution in partnering with mainly listed companies that are having more to spend and probably work around that. If the government has proper financial management, business can assist them in a lot of those
Professor
activities.
Bauer, just your closing comments.
My closing comments are that that we have to work together on this matter. This is not something that's going to be resolved by the universities or by the government or by the students or by the parents. This is something that we all have to work together on. The only way to kind of get to a point where we see the possibility of all South Africans having access to higher education is by ensuring that it becomes a national project. My last comment really is that I think it's absolutely ludicrous that parents who can afford to pay between 100,000 and 200,000 rand a year for their children at primary and secondary schools should have their children come to the public universities and they pay nothing. That is ridiculous.
Professor Bauer?
We are in a society where there's such high levels of inequality.
Totally agree with you. I'm afraid we're seriously out of time. To our esteemed panelists, thanks so much indeed. I'm afraid technically we couldn't take any calls as our phone lines. We have those Monday gremlins in the system. But nonetheless, thanks so much for joining us. We take a quick ad break. We'll see you shortly.